Haley.
Hello, I'm Bausola.
Hello, my name's Raymon Gibbs.
And have you ever wondered what it means to have an assisted suicide? Do you have a family member who's suffering their terminal illnesses? Well, here we are to advocate for those who need for that. As students, we have done many hours of research and understanding to help us create a way to allow there to be assisted suicide amongst those who have those illnesses.
For our thesis statement, we talk about how there have been multiple medicines and treatments given to patients every day in order to keep them alive and healthy. However, in some instances, some illnesses and diseases can be cured right away or over time in the past few, further weeks or months. So some people come to agreement that assisted suicide would be a better option given the patient's position. For our previous statements, we'll first talk about how the problem forms when assisted suicide is refused. Second, we'll talk about the causes that happen due to not going to get the right and correct help. The third, we will talk about the solutions that can be done to fix the problem. So, there have been multiple people that have suffered from some type of disease or illness that is incurable and is a very much painful way of living, depending on what the sickness is. And some patients feel like their best option would be to just pull the plug. Some think that, some don't. And some wouldn't think to say, oh, maybe it's time for me to go, even though sometimes it'd be the best option. And usually the problem starts with trying to agree on what would be right for the patient's well-being or not, what's morally right. Usually families and doctors argue back and forth over what's right for the patients. Usually they never really consider on what are the patients thinking for themselves. They only think about what they want, what's best, not what's best for the actual patient.
And doctors put a ton of hours trying to find cures and such for certain diseases. However, there are certain diseases such as the terminal ill with cancer and things like that have no cure, and it causes things like depression or maybe things like the want for death. Now it is very evident that many of those who are not treated or helped usually have this thought of wanting to do this. Now, according to the Yale Bill Med article, up to half the patients with cancer suffer from symptoms of depression. The elderly also suffer from high rates of depression because depression often manifests somatically in patients who are not screened. Clients miss half of all cases of clinical depression. Now, knowing this, that something like this could cause the want to die, we should allow it for those who go into who know they're not going to live very long. Maybe if there's given a time of a year, maybe that one of that year suffering through the illness.
So now that we've talked about some of the problems and some of the causes with physician-assisted suicide, I will now discuss some of the solutions. The problem is difficult to solve. However, there are some ways to solve this issue, although they are difficult to figure out. First is those for loss of function. They must create a plan with the doctor to go out before they decline too much. Those who have lost the ability to choose or the power to choose should have their family along with them to create that plan along with their doctor to be able to develop what will be best for them going forward. Samuel Kirstein says someone who is paralyzed should be able to choose whether or not they live the rest of their life paralyzed or not. And if they are autonomous, they should be able to choose whether or not they live or die. It is their choice to live. It is their choice to die. It is their decision to make with the doctor to choose whether or not it is the best decision going forward for themselves. Second is the terminally ill have a time frame, and they don't want to suffer from these diseases, and they'd rather go out quickly with their families while in good health. Something that is good about this is it prevents the patient from suffering for a long term and prevents them from having to deal with this for a long period of time. Ezekiel J. Emanuel says, at the end of the life, 5% of people still have pain even in hospitals. So euthanasia should be legal for that 5% to prevent them from suffering for the last years of their life. Although it's a small percentage, only 5%, that is thousands suffering yearly in hospitals, maybe even millions over a few hundred years. So ending peacefully and not suffering would be best for them.
When physicians, so this graph right here is the Oregon graph of the assisted suicide. So things like the loss of autonomy, which is like 86% for reason, are they're less able to enjoy life. The loss of dignity, maybe the loss of control over body and burden on others, and there's many who are in pain. This was done in 2006, where they record all this, but it's proof that it does help in some way or another.
To conclude, we first discussed the problems that are arisen when you bring up physician-assisted suicide. Second, we discussed some of the causes that come along with it. And third, we discussed the solutions to said problems and causes. There are thousands of medicines out there and thousands of diseases. However, some are not curable, and some people lose function due to these diseases. The patient should be able to choose whether or not they live with this disease and suffer for the rest of their life, or decide whether they want to go out now. Imagine seeing a family member sick for a long period of time. Wouldn't you rather have them go out peacefully without suffering rather than seeing their health continue to decline until they finally pass?